Victoria Harper was a woman who had a lot of money. She lived in a huge house full of expensive and beautiful things like luxury furniture and large gardens that looked perfect. Everything in her life was chic and elegant. Wherever she went, people knew she was rich, and Victoria liked to show it to everyone. She always wore elegant clothes and sparkling jewelry that attracted a lot of attention, but despite all the luxury around her, her heart seemed cold and distant. She had a maid called Martha who lived in the house with her daughter Clara. They worked hard every day to keep Victoria's house spotless. However, Victoria never treated them kindly to her. Martha and Clara were just people who served as if they weren't important. Victoria didn't even bother to really get to know them or thank them for their work. All she cared about was maintaining her life of luxury and her parties full of important guests. Clara, Martha's daughter, was a curious little girl full of dreams. Even though she lived in that huge mansion, she knew that her mother and she were not treated as part of the family. They were invisible to Victoria, who didn't seem to have time to look at the people around her. Clara watched Victoria's glamorous life, and even though she was only a child, felt that it wasn't for them. Victoria, with her arrogant attitude, never showed an ounce of kindness. She believed that because she was rich, she was above everyone else, and that Martha and Clara were just there to make her perfect world work. She was harsh and indifferent, as if money was the only value that mattered. One fine day, Victoria organized a big party at her mansion. Her parties were always very lavish, with lots of food, live music, and important guests, all dressed in expensive and elegant clothes. People laughed, chatted, and enjoyed themselves in the mansion's impeccable gardens. For Victoria, these parties were an opportunity to show off her wealth and her perfect life. Everything had to be impeccable, with no room for error. Martha, the maid, was busy taking care of everything as usual. She ran around making sure every detail was just right. Clara, her daughter, watched from afar, admiring all the glitz and glamour of the party, but knowing that they were not part of that world. Suddenly something unexpected happened. A glass of champagne fell, spilling the golden liquid onto the white tablecloth. It was a small accident, but for Victoria it seemed like the end of the world. When Victoria saw the stained tablecloth, her face changed completely. She was furious. Without thinking twice, she looked directly at Martha, who was standing near the table. Victoria didn't care what had really happened or whether it was really Martha's fault. She just wanted to find someone to blame. Angrily, she shouted at Martha, calling her incompetent and saying that she didn't want to see her or her daughter in that house anymore. Martha tried to explain with tears in her eyes, saying that it was an accident and that she would clean it up, but Victoria, cold and cruel, wouldn't listen. In a harsh voice, she said that Martha and Clara only had an hour to get out of her house, or else she would call the police. With no choice, Martha and Clara were forced to leave, not knowing what they would do or where they would go. When Martha and Clara left the mansion, they didn't know where to go. All they had was a small suitcase with some clothes and a few belongings. The night was drawing in, and the cold wind made them shiver as they walked through the streets. Martha's heart was heavy with worry for her daughter. She held Clara's hand tightly, trying to hide her fear, but the truth was that they were completely lost. After walking for a long time, they found a temporary shelter where they could spend the night. The place was simple, with hard beds and many other residents facing their own battles. Despite the uncomfortable surroundings, Martha knew she had no other choice. She hugged Clara tightly that night, promising herself that she would find a way to change the situation. No matter how hard it was, she would do anything to protect her daughter. Clara, even though she was a little girl, understood how much her mother was suffering. She saw the tears that Martha was trying to hide, and even though she was afraid, she tried to be strong to help her mother through it. Over time, they began to adapt to the new reality, but the pain of having lost everything was still very strong. They missed the security that the mansion offered, even though though they knew they were never really treated with respect there in that shelter. Martha and Clara faced the cold uncertainty and fear of the future, but despite everything there was one thing that kept them going: hope. Martha, even in the face of all the difficulties, believed that they could start again, and Clara, inspired by her mother's strength, knew that somehow they would get through this tough time. In the days that followed, Martha knew she couldn't afford to stand still. Even though she was tired and hopeless, she knew she had to find a job to support her daughter. Every day she went out early, walking the streets of the city, knocking on doors, asking for any kind of service, but finding a job wasn't easy. Many people didn't even want to hear her story. Every time someone said no, Martha's heart squeezed a little tighter, but she didn't give up. For her, the only thing that mattered was ensuring Clara's well-being. Even with no fixed address and no references from an old job, Martha kept trying. She knew she couldn't give up hope because her daughter needed her, and that motivation was what kept her going even in the face of so many difficulties. While Martha faced rejection and closed doors, Clara remained by her mother's side, helping in any way she could. She watched her mother's strength and courage, and even though she was only a child, she understood the gravity of the situation. As time went by, Clara began to be inspired by this daily struggle, promising herself that one day she would do something to help change the situation. As difficult as it was, Martha didn't let despair take over. She knew that at some point someone would give her a chance, and when they did, she would work tirelessly to ensure that they would never have to live on the streets again. Every no she received made her more determined to keep fighting for a better future for her and her daughter. While her mother spent her days looking for work, Clara found a place where she felt safe: the public library. There, among the shelves full of books, she could forget, at least for a few hours, all the difficulties she faced with her mother. The library was quiet, and the books seemed to transport Clara to distant worlds full of possibilities. It was as if she could for a few moments escape from the harsh reality she lived in. Clara soon began to spend most of her days there while her mother battled on the streets. She dedicated herself to studying and reading. Every book she read made her more curious and more dreamy. She discovered that through words she could travel and learn about things she had never imagined. Even at such a young age, Clara developed a great love for writing, and this love became a source of hope at the library. Clara also made friends with the staff, who saw her as a special girl. They noticed how dedicated she was to her studies and soon began to encourage her to dream bigger. "You have a talent for telling stories," they said. "Don't stop reading and writing." These small gestures of encouragement made all the difference to Clara, who began to believe that perhaps in the future she could do something great. For Clara, the library became much more than just a place with books. It was a refuge, a place where she felt safe, away from the problems she faced. There she could be herself without the weight of difficulties, and dream of a different future, a future where she could write her own stories and change her reality. Over time, Clara's teachers and the town librarians began to realize that she was a different girl, full of determination and talent. Even though she faced so many difficulties, she never gave up studying and was always looking to learn more. The books she read in the library were a way of escaping from reality, but also a way of preparing for a better future, and those who saw her every day knew that she was special. Clara's teachers, realizing her great potential, began to encourage her to take part in writing competitions. They saw in her a young girl with a gift for writing, someone who could Use words to tell important stories. You have a unique voice, Clara. They said, don't let anyone stop you dreaming. You can go far. These words of encouragement made Clara believe more and more in her future. In addition to the teachers, the librarians also began to help Clara. They saw her spending hours and hours among the books and knew she had something special, so they began to suggest that she explored journalism as a possible career. You can tell stories that change the world, they said. The idea of being a journalist began to grow in Clara's heart, and she began to dream of writing about the injustices of the world, something she herself was already familiar with. With all this support, Clara felt she wasn't alone. Even with the difficulties at home, there were people who believed in her and were willing to help her grow. This gave her even more strength to keep going, study harder, and fight for a future where her words could make a difference. While Clara excelled in her studies, Martha continued her tireless struggle to find a job that could support them. After many attempts and closed doors, her persistence was finally rewarded. She got a temporary job cleaning houses. Although the pay was low and the working conditions difficult for Martha, it was an important step towards ensuring that she and her daughter would not go hungry. Soon after, Martha also got a permanent job in a hospital cleaning the corridors and patients' rooms. The work was heavy and Martha often came home exhausted. But despite her fatigue, she was grateful to finally have a more stable source of income. Every penny she earned, she saved carefully, always thinking of Clara's future. For her, there was no sacrifice too great when it came to her daughter. In addition to the hospital, Martha also found a steady job in a restaurant where she washed dishes and helped in the kitchen. The pay was still meager, but now she had two jobs that helped her provide for the basic needs of the home. Little by little, Martha began to see a glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel. Even with all the difficulties, she was managing to improve their lives. Martha worked tirelessly, and her strength was the certainty that day by day they were getting closer to a better life. Whenever she felt tired or discouraged, all she had to do was look at Clara and remember why she was fighting so hard. She knew that with a lot of effort they were moving in the right direction. Time passed, and all Clara's effort and dedication finally paid off. After years of studying in the library, taking part in writing competitions, and relying on the support of her teachers and librarians, Clara achieved something that had seemed like a distant dream. She received news that would change her life. She had been accepted at Columbia University, one of the most prestigious in the country, with a full scholarship to study journalism. She was overcome with emotion the moment she read the acceptance letter. Clara couldn't hold back the tears. She rushed to tell her mother the news, who was equally thrilled. For Martha, this was the moment she had been waiting for, to see her daughter get an opportunity that could completely transform their lives. The two of them hugged each other tightly, feeling that all the sacrifice, all the difficult nights, and all the days of struggle were finally paying off. Studying at a university as important as Columbia was more than an academic achievement for Clara. It was a symbol of overcoming, a milestone that showed how far she had come. Despite all the difficulties she had faced, the full scholarship meant that Clara could concentrate on her studies without worrying about the costs, and this gave her even more motivation to continue pursuing her dreams. Now, with this new opportunity in her hands, Clara felt like her life was really beginning. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but she was ready to face the new challenges that university and adult life would bring, and above all, she was determined to use the education and opportunities she had received to make a difference in the world, just as she had always dreamed years after she had thrown Martha and Clara out of her mansion. Victoria Harper reappeared in an unexpected form while Clara was already a young adult making a name for herself as a journalist. Victoria, who had followed Clara's success through her reports, began to feel the weight of her old decision. The rich and arrogant woman who had once seen Martha and Clara as nothing more than servants was now faced with a great regret. She knew she had made a terrible mistake in the past and wanted to try and put things right. Victoria decided to look for Clara even though she knew it would be difficult. She wanted to do something to show that she was sorry, so she sent Clara an email asking for a meeting. In the message, Victoria explained that she had followed Clara's work and recognized the impact of her actions in the past. She admitted that she had been cruel and insensitive and that she wanted to make amends somehow. Clara was surprised to receive the message. She had never expected to hear from Victoria again, especially after everything her mother and she had been through. On the one hand, Clara still felt angry and hurt about what Victoria had done, but on the other hand, her curiosity and sense of justice as a journalist made her consider the meeting proposal. She knew that this was an important moment both for her career and her personal life. When they finally met, Victoria was visibly different. She no longer had the same air of superiority and seemed more fragile both physically and emotionally. Victoria apologized sincerely and also offered a large donation to support Clara's work as a journalist. She wanted to help Clara continue to impact the world with her reporting and believed that in some way this could be a small step towards righting the wrong she had caused. After meeting Victoria Harper, Clara reflected for some time. The offer of a donation was significant and could greatly helped the work she had already been doing. However, accepting this help would not be easy. After all, Victoria had been responsible for one of the most difficult moments in her and her mother's lives. The pain and humiliation of being expelled without any compassion were still fresh in her memory. It was a difficult situation and Clara knew she had to make a decision. After much thought, Clara decided to accept the donation but made it clear to Victoria that this did not mean that all was forgiven. She explained that money couldn't erase the past and that it would take time to deal with all the feelings she still carried. However, she saw the donation as a way of turning something negative into something positive. With this money, Clara could help many other people who, like her and her mother, faced difficulties and injustices. Clara used Victoria's donation to set up a fund to support young journalists on low incomes. She knew that many talented young people didn't have the same opportunities that she had, and she wanted to be a bridge so that these people could realize their dreams. The fund quickly gained recognition and began to attract more donations from other sponsors, allowing Clara to extend the reach of her entity and help even more young people. Although Clara was still not completely over what had happened, she felt at peace with her decision. By turning Victoria help into something that would make a difference in other people's lives, she was giving new meaning to that past pain. In this way, her story of overcoming not only inspired others but also helped to create a better future for many young people who dreamed of following the same path as her.